Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode on Football Talk Podcast. My name is Ozzy, and I'm your host for this evening. Today, we'll be discussing quite a few rumors circling in regards to potential strikers joining the club, but also um, another defender coming into the club, as well as other rumors regarding players leaving Liverpool. So, today, we'll begin with the first rumor that started circling yesterday was Isak and Osimhen. Now, the strange part of this rumor was the fact that we are assessing both players, but it wasn't just if we were going to sign one or the other. It was actually that we're going to sign both strikers, which is a slightly unusual case in terms of both strikers being high profile, and I don't think one would accept being on the bench in that regards. Um, so that's the first reaction I had in terms of this rumor being circulating. Of course, if you put context into it, we are currently in negotiations with Napoli for Darwin Nunes, and it has been earmarked that a swap deal or something of that nature, where both players swap clubs, could be a possibility. In regards to Isak, this is the one that we're going to pursue. If you read the rumors, I have an inkling that there is some truth to us in terms of trying to get that deal over the line. Um, the current rumor in regards to Isak and Newcastle is that they've actually stopped any further contract negotiations, and Isak has requested that, if possible, for him to move to Liverpool. So it looks like it's Liverpool or nothing at this stage. And we've also got indication that Liverpool will make an offer at some point. Now, in terms of the bid, it'll probably be in the region of around 120, 130 million. I think that will be the deal that will hopefully get over the line. Um, so the big question is, do we have any chance of signing Isak after we've just spent a good chunk of money, about 170 million signing Florian Wirtz, Frimpong, and Kerkez. Look, call me deluded, but something is telling me that we are going to sign Alexander Isak. I don't know where it is, and I'm not sure why I'm having these sort of feelings, but my gut is telling me that he will eventually be a Liverpool player before the window closes. It might be due to the fact that we've just signed Florian Wirtz, which is a Premier League record, or shall I say our record. I don't think it's officially a Premier League record due to it being 100 million plus 16 million add-ons. Rival fans will tell you it's 120, 125 just to make, it fit the narrative that we have spent above and beyond. But nonetheless, I think the way we're moving right now, it's different to what we have done over the years, especially under the stewardship of Michael Edwards and Richard Hughes. We're acting like a big club. We're not being sentimental in terms of keeping certain players. For example, we've got Harvey Elliott in the team, who we all know is a boyhood red, but he doesn't fit the philosophy of the coach. So therefore, it's probably best for him and for the club as well for him to move on and pursue his career elsewhere. This been a few years ago, maybe under Jurgen Klopp. This might have not been, something in the radar because Jurgen Klopp would have wanted to kept hold of him due to his sort of affection and love for the club. So that could definitely be something that is, used as a positive, and you can always rely on someone who has that sort of passion for the team as well. But it looks like we're not moving, in that kind of manner. We're being a bit more ruthless in the transfer market. We've already sort of listed a few players that could be leaving the club. So it's going to be interesting, in terms of what happens with the Isak deal. Plus, from a Newcastle point of view, they're a club that are in the Champions League, so they need to invest into their squad. They don't have the funds, unfortunately. They've got, a very wealthy owner who I'm sure we all are aware of, but due to, PSR sort of rules and regulations, they're not able to spend, based on their owner's wealth. It has to be, you know, money generated through sponsorships or TV rights, all that sort of stuff. And if they're not making any sales, then they haven't really balanced the books. So that's probably why they're a bit more open to selling Isak. Of course, they're not going to say it publicly, but the stance has changed from he's not for sale to we're open to negotiations if someone meets us with the right offer. And the sort of talk of the town is that it could be around 120, £130 million. That should be enough to get that deal over the line. So we'll see, because Newcastle, they have a lot of work to do from their point of view. They've had quite a few bids rejected for the likes of Alanga. João Pedro is actually, on his way to joining Chelsea now. So they're missing out on targets. So had they had, if they had the Isak funds available, then they would have been able to get some of those deals over the line. So it's crunching time for Newcastle. I know some fans from Newcastle have, yeah, not taking this news very lightly. I've seen comments on social media. I've seen comments on other content creators channels that have been, yeah, not very respectable or nice in regards to these rumors. And they're certainly feeling the annoyance about Liverpool taking one of their star players. But this is how it is, unfortunately. We've encountered it ourselves when we lost Coutinho, and the fans felt that frustration. So I'm not saying, Newcastle deserve or anything to that nature, but unfortunately, that is the way how football goes sometimes. But from a good point of view in terms of Newcastle, the positive that they can look at is that they will have more funds to reinvest into the squad. Now, whether the sale Isak could affect their relationship remains to be seen. But from a Liverpool point of view, uh, we've got the inkling that they want to do business now. Before, we were quite we were standoffish in terms of not wanting to talk unless we knew that there was any chance of us signing the player. So now the sort of the tone or the momentum has shifted a little bit, where they seem to be a bit more open to speak now. So let's see how it goes. It's still a bit early days, and the only reason I say that is because I think Liverpool are waiting to sell one or two attackers before we make that official approach, i.e. Darwin Núñez. I think that's the stumbling block right now. That's the player we want to sell, as that will, of course, make space for a player like Isak to join. Um, Whether that happens in the coming days remains to be seen. There's still quite a distance in terms of Napoli and Liverpool meeting the common ground of his valuation. I think Liverpool value him at 60 million. I think it's euros, so I think pounds about 55 million. I think Napoli are only willing to spend around 40. But they do have the funds. They sold Kvaratskhelia for around 70 million in January. They are linked with another player. I think it was Noah Long, the Dutch winger. So that's a player that I think is probably like for like, um, for Napoli to replace Kvaratskhelia in their team. So maybe Chiesa isn't destined to go, because that was a player that was earmarked to go there as well. So they still have funds to, they can definitely chip in 50 million, because that would, equal to 70 million altogether. So very interesting to tell what happens there. But I do feel like Isak is the one that we're going to go really hard with. And if for some reason we can't get it over the line, I think we have other options. And the other options that we have, one of them is Victor Osimhen. Now, in regards to Victor Osimhen, he's in a bit of a tricky situation because he's just come back from a loan spell at Galatasaray, did really well, scored an abundance of goals there, and has now returned to his parent club, which is Napoli. Now, he's already got, a tricky sort of relationship with Napoli, where they're not on good terms, especially him and the president. And the club definitely wants to sell him, and he definitely wants to leave. It looked like he was on the verge of joining a team in Saudi. I think it was Al Hilal that was the strongest team linked with Osimhen. But whatever happened, I think there was some sort of breakdown in negotiations or something to that nature. So that deal wasn't able to be concluded. So now it puts the player in a bit of a dilemma, and also the club. So from a Liverpool point of view, what if we presented a swap deal or something along those lines where we sold Darwin Nunes for around 50 odd million and then we signed Isak for around a similar fee because I think Isak has a release clause of 60 million euros anyway, so it's pretty much like for like. It's just that it has to be presented as two separate deals rather than your FIFA career mode swap deal because that doesn't really happen in this day and age. So my thoughts on Osimhen, would he be a good signing for Liverpool? I think he would be. I think he'd be a great signing for us. He's an upgrade in terms of what we have currently in our squad. So in terms of Darwin Núñez, he's definitely an upgrade on him. I know some fans may disagree with that, surprisingly. They feel like he's quite similar to Osimhen. I definitely don't share that sentiment. I think Osimhen is by far a more complete player. He's a better finisher by a country mile. He's got better hold up play. He's got a good sort of movement around the box, which is why he's always able to score tap ins and he's able to score a different variation of goals, in my opinion. I feel like he's a bit more accomplished. He's been doing it consistently for a number of years now at a very difficult league in Serie A, and he's done it across Europe, and he's done it for his nation in terms of Nigeria. So for me, he is an upgrade in my opinion. Now in terms of Jota, slightly different in terms of the profile. Of course, they're both strikers, but Osimhen is probably more similar to Darwin in terms of build and the way they play. Jota is more of a finisher, but unfortunately, I think due to his sort of injury issues that he's had over the years, I think that has taken a toll on his body, and he's not quite the same player, in my opinion. And last season, I thought fitness was more of an issue in terms of him being available for our fixtures. But when he did play last season, for me, he just didn't look like he was quite up to speed. He was missing in most of his games, if I'm being brutally honest, and pretty much was MIA. And one of the key traits that Jota has that he's able to make things happen, especially on a counter attack. But he just didn't have the legs. He didn't have that burst of speed that we're used to seeing, and therefore, when he's not producing those type of moments, he's not finding himself in goal scoring opportunities. So that's a big issue there. And even if he is in front of goal and manages to find himself in a good goal scoring opportunity, he's not been clinical last year. So that's a huge concern for me. So not to sound harsh, but I do feel like Jota is in a bit of a decline, and it might be worth Liverpool looking at either selling him if we get a good offer, or pretty much having him as a backup striker to some extent. But having said that, you can't really have a backup striker that's always injured. It doesn't make sense to have someone like that in your squad because if your star striker is injured and then you look towards your backup striker and he's not available either, you have to try and find a makeshift striker in the team, which we did last season. They're not working well for us in terms of Luis Diaz, but that's not something we should have done. We should have relied upon Diogo Jota to be ready or to be involved in games when called upon. So, in terms of Osimhen, I think he would be a great signing for us. 60 million for a player of his age and quality, I don't think it's a crazy amount, especially in this day and age where you got the likes of Sesko being linked to a 90 million move to Arsenal and all that sort of stuff. So for me, it's not a crazy amount. João Pedro's just gone for 50 million, so it's not. It's pretty much a similar range in terms of the fee being paid. So I think Osimhen would be a fantastic signing for Liverpool. But also today, we got some sort of update in regards to Hugo Ekitike. So I'll just quickly read the tweet out loud for everyone. So this is on Dave Olcott's page. There's a big up to Dave. He says Liverpool are working on the signing of Hugo Ekitike. Speaking on YouTube, Fabrizio Romano said Liverpool are working on this deal. They are discussing the possibility of adding Hugo Ekitike to their squad. The idea of Liverpool is to have one more striker. They are waiting to understand what happens with Darwin Núñez with conversations ongoing with Napoli. Liverpool can add a new striker, so Hugo Ekitike remains a name on the list for the club. Of course, this is not a deal happening today or tomorrow. We need to be patient, but Ekitike is a name on the list for Liverpool. So my thoughts on that tweet, it's not something that's groundbreaking, if I'm being honest with you. It's something we've been aware of for some time now. We all know that Hugo Ekitike is a player that the club really rates. He's definitely part of our list in terms of targets, but he's not priority. I think some fans took this sort of interview from Romano as he's our high priority. He's at top of our priority list. He's not. I think Isak is the number one target for us in terms of signing that new striker. And for whatever reason, if that's not been able to get concluded, or Newcastle are refusing to negotiate, or whatever the reason is that we can't get that deal done, I believe Hugo Ekitike is probably our second choice after Isak, or third choice if Osimhen is part of that mix as well. If based around the rumors, but it might be where it's Isak or Ekitike, so it probably rules out Osimhen in the running. But I do believe Ekitike is definitely top three in terms of our targets. Earlier this season, I probably said Gyökeres was higher than Ekitike because I feel like Gyökeres is more established and it's a player that could be, able to come in and, you know, play in the team without having that adaptation period. And he's a bit more polished in front of goal. But it looks like he could be off to Arsenal. Nothing certain. Apparently, he's thrown a bit of a tantrum with the sporting director, who promised that he would be able to be sold this summer, but he's not lived up to his word. And yeah, the sporting director or the owner and Eucharist are bumping heads right now. So he's trying to get a move away from the club, and it looks like Arsenal are the club that he wants to join. So we'll see, what happens in regards to that. But in terms of Ekitike, if Isak wasn't possible, which it hurts to say out loud, but if that move wasn't feasible for us to do this summer, I think Ekitike would be a good signing for us. He's still a bit raw, in my opinion, in terms of being a prolific striker, but he's at that level where he's not far off. So if he was able to come into a Liverpool team and up his game a little bit, um, I think he can at least reach that level that a lot of us fans see in Ekitike, where he's a player with huge potential, and I feel like in years to come could be one of the best strikers in Europe, in my opinion. So it might be wise to sign a striker like that if you can't get the ready-made or the established striker Isak right now. Maybe go for the guy that's going to be the next Isak, and that is Ekitike, in my opinion. So huge decision from Liverpool. That's why I feel like until Darwin Núñez doesn't leave the club, we won't know entirely who that striker will be. But as it stands, it looks like Liverpool are trying to go for Isak, and Ekitike is possibly regarded as a backup option if we can't sign the Newcastle striker. So, in terms of these three strikers, my verdict is that, well, firstly, the rumor yesterday was that we're looking to sign Isak and Osimhen. Is that a real possibility? Honestly, I don't think it is. Um, I'll be very surprised if that happens. That's something, you do on FIFA, or something along those lines. It's not something that is a reality, because I think Osimhen is good enough to start for a lot of teams in Europe. So he wouldn't want to join a club at the same time as Isak and accept being not second choice, but pretty much coming in to fight for his place. He would rather join a club where he knows he's going to be the main man, like he was at Galatasaray, like he was supposed to be at Al Hilal. Well, of course, that move didn't happen. So I would be very surprised if that was something on the cards, and that's a role that he would accept on paper for Liverpool. It's the dream combination, isn't it? Having Isak and Osimhen, because if one's not available, the other one's just as good enough to come in and take that position. So unfortunately, I don't think there's any truth to that rumor. I think it might have been misconstrued a little bit, and maybe what it should have been presented as was that it was Isak who's our number one target, and then Osimhen would be regarded as our sort of backup. Or if we're not able to get that deal done, then we'll look at Osimhen. more than anything else. So no, I don't completely agree with that. I don't think there's any truth to that rumor. And is Ekitike a top priority for Liverpool if Liverpool are unable to sign Isak? I think so. I think, as much as I rate Osimhen, I think the club might go for a different route for whatever reason. I would personally say Osimhen is the second choice after Isak, and then it's Ekitike, but they might not think Osimhen's the right fit, and they will end up going for Ekitike instead. So all I do know is I do feel like these three strikers are the ones that we're looking at, and we're just probably monitoring the situation. And I think we've approached all three players, agents or their agencies, um, and made them aware that look, we are interested in their clients or or the player, and we'll be in touch. We've got to sell one or two players in our squad, and once we do that, we'll be in contact with you. So I think they've registered interest in all three players, uh, and once we get a bit of clarity with Darwin Nunes and his transfer away from the club, I think that's when we'll see the ball rolling for the new sort of striker coming into Liverpool. So I don't think this will be something that happens anytime soon. I think this will rumble on for a few weeks, and then we'll get some clarification. I guess I just hope that we can get a deal done for either striker, whoever it's going to be, before the season starts. That would be the ideal situation. Our preseason fixtures are not too far away. We've got our first fixture, I believe, next Sunday. We'll be facing Preston away, which is kind of a tradition. We always face Preston in our opening game, and I believe we'll be facing AC Milan as well. So, that will be towards the end of July. If we were able to get a signing before then that would make the perfect sense. But right now, I think the striker one will probably be the last signing we make. I think the next signing will be a centre back who I'm going to talk about very shortly. And then once we get clarity into the where Darwin Nunes is, then we'll make that move um, for that next striker. So drop a comment, let me know who you think Liverpool will try to sign as the star striker for us next season. Is it Isak, Ekitike, or Osimhen, or do you have another player in mind? Maybe there's another player I haven't mentioned today that you feel like maybe Liverpool will be in pursuing. So feel free to drop a comment and let me know what you think. Now, in terms of other news today, um, we've got some further updates in regards to uh, Marc Guehi. Now, just going to present the tweet. Nothing crazy in terms of what we don't know. Liverpool and Marc Guehi have reached an agreement on personal terms ahead of his proposed move to Liverpool, which is very, very positive news. So we've got one thing out of the way, and that is agreeing terms with the player. So that is positive. There were some rumblings, I would say, last week where people were suggesting that the terms might be a bit of a tricky obstacle for Liverpool uh, and Guehi, because they thought Guehi might not accept our terms or anything of that nature. I don't know what presented that question. Um, I think Liverpool will definitely match whatever Gay's requirements are. It's not going to be too crazy now, is it? So I didn't think this was a stumbling block. For me, the issue now is the transfer fee with the two clubs now, because Crystal Palace will try and get the most out of this situation. Gay is their club captain. He's the one that helped the team, on the way to winning the FA Cup last season. Uh, he was set to captain them into the Europa League. But the Europa League's issue is a bit of a concern for them, because I believe today or tomorrow we'll get some clarity in regards to their position, because due to their ownership at Palace, where they've got one owner who owns, I think, shares at Lyon, there's a conflict of interest between the two clubs. So therefore, Crystal Palace, we need to find another stakeholder to have a superior share into the club, and then that's when they can assess that situation. So that's what I think they're doing now, because they did end up finding another shareholder. I'm not sure, I've forgotten his name now, but it was someone from America who owned I think he owned a basketball club. But we'll get that clarity tomorrow, because if for some reason the UEFA decline that proposal and say, look, that's not good enough for us. Um, and our decision is final that you guys are not able to compete in the European League next season due to conflict of interest in terms of ownership. Uh, that puts Palace in a bit of a tricky situation because it could scumper their transfer plans for this summer. They knew that if they win the FA Cup, they can compete in the Europa League next season. They already had targets in mind in order to bolster the squad and really, have a go at it next season. But if they can't get um, European football next year, then they have to assess the current situation, which is how do they raise funds in order to still have a quality squad, and it might change Gay's stance at the club as well because he'll probably go over to the Crystal Palace hierarchy and say, you know, we're not playing Europa League football, and for me, there's an interest from the Premier League champions, and that's the club I want to join. So he'll probably put that pressure on the owners. He's on his final year of his contract, so there's not too much of a sort of a bargaining here where Palace can't ask for a crazy amount of money like they did last year when Newcastle offered 70 odd million, which ended up getting rejected. But this time around it's different. It's where players on his final year, it's the Premier League champions, and when the champions come knocking, it does change the whole notion of that player in terms of he may have had plans to stay at the club, but if Liverpool came approaching him, then he probably thought, you know what, I might not get this opportunity again. So let me assess the situation and let me see what I can do. Um, so it'll be interesting in terms of what happens. We'll do a show tomorrow where we'll speak about Guehi in a bit more detail, see what he brings to the table, and hopefully we'll get a bit of clarity into the Crystal Palace's position, and then we can discuss the bigger picture and try and predict what the final transfer fee will be. I think it'll be around 35, 40 million. That would be the range I think is realistic and achievable for Liverpool to get concluded. Um, whether it happens or not remains to be seen. But I'm quite positive about this deal getting done. I believe this deal will get done before we hear anything about a new striker coming into the club. So if we get Gay over the line, this would be a fantastic signing for the club. He ticks a lot of boxes in terms of playing style. He can play in the back three, he can play in the back four, good with both feet, uh, very good in terms of his tackling, great at distribution as well. Can even play DM if called upon. Very experienced in the Premier League level, one of the first names on the England team sheet. So he's got a lot going for him. So only 24 years of age, so plenty of room for him to grow. And I feel like him playing alongside Konate or Van Dijk, would definitely improve his game. And I feel like those three, even if we play the back three, for example, can form a great partnership, or even in a back two where he's playing alongside Van Dijk or he's playing alongside Konate. I think he can form great partnerships with both defenders. So he's a very sort of not unique profile, but he's a very, very interesting profile where ticks a lot of boxes. He's at the right age, right experience. He's a player that I feel like presents leadership qualities as well, which is a fantastic trait to have going forward. So it's all positive in my opinion with us signing Guehi. I know some fans still have a bit of reservations about the Crystal Palace defender. I think he makes perfect sense, and if you were to put the team on paper, he would form a good partnership with Joe Gomez as well. Someone I haven't even mentioned. I think they would form a good partnership together as well. So I think Van Dijk, Konate, Gomez, and Gay as your four centre backs. I think that's the perfect combination. Honestly, um, other teams might disagree and say, "Oh, they've got better," but I think that's got the perfect balance. So I'm very excited about this signing. I'm really hoping it happens in due course. Um, I believe it will. I think we'll hear an announcement sooner rather than later. And yeah, happy days for Liverpool. So for me, this would be a great step in the right direction for Liverpool, making the right appointments in this window. And of course, he's homegrown, which helps us in regards to our tick box activity when it comes to squad registration. Now on to the next player, and that is Harvey Elliott. Now we got some further clarification in regards to Liverpool's valuation for Harvey Elliott, and this is where we stand currently. So Liverpool have two sort of proposals here. So we value Harvey Elliott at 40 million, but the contract will involve a buyback clause, or it will be 50 million pounds without a buyback clause. So the big question is this the right valuation from the club? In my opinion, yes, I think it is. I think 40 million for Harvey Elliott is a good price range for us to sell the player. You'd argue to say, look, maybe it should be increased a little bit due to the impact that he had for England in the Euros. But I think 40 is about right, and then because we've added the buyback clause, it makes perfect sense to do that. But if a club is like, no, we don't want to do no buyback clause, uh, 50 million for me is probably the right. I would probably value him at 50 million now. I think that impact he had in the tournament should have increased the stock to 45, 50 million. So for me, that's about the right price range for Harvey Elliott. But the big question is, if we do insert a buyback clause, is there any likelihood that we'll activate it in years to come? Because I think what normally happens is with those sort of deals, you get 2 years, and then in that second year, if you haven't activated, then it pretty much becomes invalid. And I'm just thinking in terms of the history of the Premier League, I can't come across a player that has returned from a buyback clause and has been successful at the original club. If you have any names in the chat, please do let me know. I can't think of anyone that's been a success. So these sort of deals, it sounds great on paper and it sounds great from a business point of view, but there's nothing that I can say, that I've witnessed that has, worked out in the past. So for me, if we can get 50 million, that'd probably be the right thing to do, and reinvest that into a squad, because with Harvey Elliott, I don't believe we'll be signing a direct replacement. Foreign Verts technically takes that role from him, and he overtakes Szoboszlai in the pecking order if you look at that number 10 position. So that money will probably be used onto another player, whether it's a striker or a left winger or a winger in general, because it could be where Liverpool target a winger who can play both wings, and I think that would be quite smart to do, uh, because we don't really have a direct backup for Salah. If you believe the rumors, Chiesa is set to also leave at some point as well. So if Harvey Elliott and Chiesa go, we don't really have a backup right winger for Mohamed Salah, and that would be a concern going into next season. Of course, if Diaz stays, then you've got a player that can play in that role. Um, but you really want someone who can come in and put in a shift on that side of the pitch. But let's see what happens. Javier is an interesting one because I think us fans know what he brings to the table in terms of his quality, but Klopp just doesn't see him as his type of player. And I don't think it's from a technical point of view. I think it's more so the the sort of the off the ball sort of situations where uh, a lot of people saying his physicality, like he doesn't have the physicality. I don't think that's complete issue. I think it's more so his energy levels and his pressing, because our front players normally, attack very, very rigorously at the top. So Szoboszlai, for example, he's the one that sets the tone. Salah might not, use that energy to that extent, but he still does press for the team. Um, so I think those are kind of the traits I feel like maybe Harvey is not able to do that continuously in a full 90 minutes. That's why he was used more as an impact sub rather than a starter last season. I think technically he is sound. I think he's a very technically gifted player. Um, so it's just a shame that it has to come to this point, because you've got a player in Harvey Elliott who is a boyhood red. He's one of us, and he's pretty much living the dream. So it's it's a sour moment for someone like Harvey Elliott to leave his boyhood club. But he has to do what's best for him. He needs to look out for himself. He needs to look out for his own career, and make sure he doesn't become one of the fringe players in the squad. Because I think he's very talented and can play for another Premier League team, in my opinion. So let's see what happens, with Harvey Elliott. Some fans are hoping maybe the performances he produced at the Euros could sway Arne Slot's mind. I don't think that'll happen. I think Arne Slot seems to be quite strong-minded with these sort of things. So it looks like Harvey is still destined to leave, but we can discuss this very, very soon. I've got a show scheduled for Thursday. We will talk about Harvey in more detail. So make sure to tune in for that one. Before I move on to the next rumor, just got a comment here from Double D. Big up Double D. Says, I'd like Harvey to stay myself. Was hoping the under 21 tournament may have made Slot see things differently. I think a lot of fans echo your sentiment there in terms of, maybe change the coach's mind. I don't know. Remains to be seen because we still have preseason coming up, and he has been given a date to return to the club in terms of getting involved in preseason. So he's still coming back to the club, unless something crazy happens the next few days where someone makes a bid and we're ready to sell him. It might be where he comes back, starts assesses him a bit more, and then might decide to kind of pull the plug on not selling him. So you can't rule it out completely because obviously we're not we're not among Armstrong's coaching staff, but the likelihood that he will end up leaving this summer. But we'll see. We'll see what happens. We'll get some clarification, I guess, in the next week or so. And the next rumor and the final rumor of today is Luis Diaz. Now, this was breaking news earlier today. Nothing crazy, but I'll just, I'll read it out loud in terms of what I saw on Twitter today. And here it is. So, excuse me, let me load up the graphic for you guys. Here we go. So this is from Sports Bild, I think how you pronounce it. So this is a German media outlet, and they are suggesting that Luis Diaz is a serious target. In quotes, things are getting serious between Bayern and Luis Diaz. Max Aber has now made a concrete approach to the Colombian winger. Concrete figures were discussed in order to prepare an offer. Diaz is open to a move away from Liverpool. Now, I spoke about Diaz, I think, a couple of weeks ago, and I did mention Bayern as one of the teams because they're in the market for a left winger. That they've been linked with the likes of Mitoma, Rafael Leao, even our own Cody Gakpo. So it's not a crazy surprise that Diaz is in the mix as well because I think Diaz wants to stay in Europe. That seems to be his angle right now. Um, there was heavy interest from Saudi Arabia in January. Clubs like Al Nassr were willing to spend 70, 80 million on signing Lucho, but seems to be that Lucho, like Darwin Núñez, doesn't want to leave Europe anytime soon and maybe wants to play at another club one more time before making that switch over to Saudi, because I think that Saudi move will always be there for these sort of talented players. So, as I assessed the clubs in Europe, I thought to myself, who could be a realistic target for him? Because Barcelona would be his dream move, and for his dad as well. But they're on the verge of signing Nico Williams. PSG would have been an option for him, but they had already recruited in January in Kvaratskhelia. I don't see us selling him to any club in the Premier League. Of course, Man City were linked to him last year, but we pretty much poured water onto that sort of suggestion because um, I don't think that, of course, in terms of the rivalry, it wasn't going to make sense. But I think even financially, the deal did not make sense either. So then you look over other teams and then into the German league and then thinking Bayern Munich, do they need a left winger? they do, according to reports that they are in the market for a high-profile player. Of course, they missed out on Florian Wirtz due to us, of course, Liverpool nicking um, their star target under their grasp, I guess. So it looks like they want to try and sign one of our players now, which is Luis Diaz. So would this be a great move for the player? It would be. Bayern Munich are, of course, still one of the most dominant teams in European football. So it would be a great move for the player. Would he fit? Well, I think he'd do a great job there, to be fair. You know, you still got Gnabry there, but he's not that dynamic player he used to be. Leroy Sané has just moved on to Galatasaray. You got Musiala, but I think Musiala prefers to play in a number 10 role, which makes sense because he's just been given number 10 as well. So he could be a good fit for that team. You've got Elise on the other side, so Diaz and Elise as your two wingers. Yeah, it's pretty much a great combination. So the big question is the transfer fee. How much are they willing to spend? You think they'll be able to spend big because they had the finances ready to sign Florian Wirtz, and they were willing to spend big on the likes of Liao and Mitoma and even Gakpo. I think they were willing to spend 70 odd million for Gakpo, which, according to rumors, Liverpool rebuffed and said, nope, he's not for sale. With Diaz, I think the club will be open to discussions because of his age, his profile, and I think the club don't want to offer him a new contract, so therefore it might make sense for him to part ways and move on to a different club or for a different challenge. Um, for me, it's a shame. I've enjoyed Diaz's last season. I think he's a player that gives his all and is very effective. He's going to be very hard to replace. And even if we get 70 million for him, if I was to replace Diaz, I want a ready-made replacement. I don't really want a project player. We're linked with Malik Fofana, who I read today has actually, well, Nottingham Forest have agreed a fee with Lyon for Malik Fofana, but he hasn't agreed to the deal because he's looking out for a Champions League team, which makes sense to be fair to him. But in terms of Luis Diaz, he's a player that I still feel like has a lot to offer. People saying he's a bit older because he's 28, 29. I feel like he's still, showing his prime level. The goal he scored for Colombia not so long ago was a sensational goal. So for me, he has a lot of talent, and I feel like what he showed last season, where he played left wing, which is of course his natural position, but also played up top and produced a great account of himself. For me, it doesn't make sense to sell him. So personally, I would like him to stay for one more year. And look, if next year another European club wants to sign him or Saudi come in again and they give him an offer that he can't refuse, then we can look at that in that situation because we will have 1 year left. Of course, in terms of the valuation of selling him in Europe would have reduced, but you know we're trying to compete for all cylinders this season. Um, if the valuation drops by 10 million, I take it because if it means that Liverpool win more trophies this year and because of Luis Diaz, then I'd rather do that than thinking about losing 10 million, in my opinion. So let's see what happens with Diaz. I do feel like he's a player that has still a lot to offer for Liverpool, but from his point of view, if he's not given a new contract or given any new terms to his current contract, then he has every right to look elsewhere and discuss with other clubs and maybe have a move um, away from Liverpool at the end of this window. But we'll see what happens with Luis Diaz. And that is it for today, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you haven't already, please don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel. Now, in terms of upcoming shows, I do have a show scheduled for tomorrow where we'll be talking about Marc Guehi, with the personal terms reportedly being agreed between the player and the club. So we'll speak about Crystal Palace's situation in terms of are they going to be competing in the Europa League next season? And if they're not, does it affect Gay's price when it comes to our negotiations with Palace? That's something we can discuss tomorrow. And then on Thursday, I'll be doing a show surrounding Harvey Elliott, if we should keep him or sell him. And on Friday, we'll have our Liverpool Transfer Talk show, which is the weekly update of all the rumors that's been circulating the airwaves, and we'll discuss it in a lot more detail. So lots of content coming your way. So if you haven't, please don't forget to like and subscribe. Also, we've just hit a milestone and we have been enabled to provide memberships to our exclusive viewers of the channel. So if you'd like to be a member, uh, I've got sort of two categories. So you can be an FTP champ or you can be an FTP icon. Feel free to scan the QR code that's on your screen, or you'll be able to hit a link in our channel profile, and then you can go over and purchase a membership. And one of the things that I'm doing with the membership is that every member that joins, £1 will be donated to charity. So that's something I plan on doing for as long as this membership thing runs. So hopefully, even if you're just wanting to support the channel, it's going to a good cause as well. So there's something there for everyone to know. And that is it for today, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. Take care, stay safe, and I hope to speak with you all very, very soon. Goodbye.